Hey everyone, welcome back to Mentor and yet another rerun show from my earlier episodes that I did on my earlier YouTube channel. This one is about first officer programs, pay-to-fly programs and buying your own type rating. I hope you'll enjoy it. There will be new content coming out maybe early next week or so. But up until then, you'll have to make do with some of my earlier shows. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy it. Thank you. So I have been receiving a couple of questions during this week and before that as well about first officer programs or pay to fly programs, and also to pay for type ratings, if that's a good idea or not. And before I start, I just want to say that I don't have much experience at all when it comes to pay to fly programs or first officers programs. I do have experience of paying for my own type rating, however. So first officer programs, well, what they are is essentially a airline or several airlines that are offering low hours, just out of school flying cadets the possibility to come in and work for that airline for a limited amount of time, normally up to 100 or 500 or even up to 1,000 hours. But instead of getting salary, they will have to pay to do that. So the airline is essentially saying that we're doing you a favor, we're giving you experience needed to progress your career, hence you pay us. So what do I think about this? Well, I think from a moral standpoint that it is not good at all. I don't think that it's right for any airline to take advantage of young people who just wants to fulfill their dream by essentially having them paying for working. There tend to be only a few airlines doing this, and which is a good thing. Okay. Now, seen from a purely personal point of view, if I was in the position that I was stuck in my career, I only had my frozen ATPL and my CPL, and I just couldn't find a way to gain hours on myself by flying parachuters or pulling sailplanes or whatever it might be, then I might consider it, okay, in order to, if I think that that would forward my career a bit, so I could get maybe at least 500 hours on a type that is well recognized in the industry, and I think that that would then mean that I could get a job in a different airline later on. There are also a few of these airlines that has the possibility of getting employment at the end of it, but from my experience they tend to misuse this. They tend to keep the people for the amount of time that they've paid for and then say, sorry, we don't have any position for you, and take in another one instead that will have to pay for yet another 500 hours. But if it's the last resort, by all means, it might be a way forward. However, I am not condoning it in any way. When it comes to type ratings, it's a different story. I have paid for my own type rating when I joined my current airline, but the difference between that and the first officer program was that my current airline had me go through several tests in order to be accepted. And once I was accepted, they said essentially, right, in order for you to start working, you have to have a type rating, and you're going to need to buy that type rating yourself. I have never regretted doing that. It was the best decision, the best financial decision that I have ever taken. But it meant that I could start working and that I got a proper job with a proper salary from the beginning. I went from flying Cessnas to flying 737s, which was a fantastic jump, which would just never have happened 15 years ago. So in my view, when you're looking at an airline that is telling you that you might need to pay for your type rating and you're coming with very low experience, I would just bite the bullet and do it if I have the financial means to do that. There are essentially in the industry at the moment 3 different ways. You might find an airline that pay for your type rating without any strings attached. However, they are very, very few. Then you will have airlines that will pay for your type rating provided that you sign a bond for maybe 5 years or at least 3 years, where if you would have to leave that airline during that time, you would have to pay the type rating back to the airline. There is also a combination of that and a reduction in initial salary to pay for your type rating. And then you have the third part, which is the one that just tells you that pay for your type rating with us, and we will then give you the standard salary that we give everyone else that's new joiners. So essentially, in most cases, you will in one way or another pay for your first type rating. Then as you build experience, when you jump between airlines later on in your career, I would say that it will become very rare for you to have to pay your type ratings. Okay, that's the first thing I would like to say about that. Then there is the issue of going out on your own and buying a type rating in the hopes of getting an airline job through it. And this is very important, and I can't stress this enough. It is very, very dangerous to do this. Okay, I hear far too many horror stories about people having done that and then having to pay for the exact same type rating in order to get a job with an airline. Now, why would that be, you ask? Well, generally airlines, especially the bigger airlines, the better airlines, they will have either a cadet scheme where you go in through their approved type rating organization, and then you come in with 0 hours and you do the type rating with them and you follow their training curve into the airline. Or they will take on direct entry first officers, but the direct entry first officers will inevitably need to have between 500 or at least 1,000 hours on type in order to be able to apply. So if you have gone and you have bought yourself a Airbus 320 rating, for example, or a Boeing 737 NG rating, and you don't get anything else than your touch and go landings that you need in order to lift the type rating, you will stand there with far too few hours in order to be employed legally. It will be against the operations manual of most airlines, or the insurance companies for the airlines will not approve of employing you. So you might have to get into a cadet scheme, thus paying the same type rating again in order to get the same job. And I've seen this happening, and it is very, very sad thing to see. So please be very careful. If you do buy a type rating, make sure that it is connected to a possibility of employment, or that you are guaranteed to get at least 500 hours of flying on type before they let you go. Okay, not less than that. 500 hours, and it's important before you do anything like this. Obviously, go out, check what the airline needs. Do they have direct entry schemes? And if they do, how many hours do they need? So you have to look at those things before you ever consider buying a type rating. Now, there are a few types, there are a few type ratings out there which you might be able to get by with just getting the type rating and still getting a job. And they tend to be types that are starting to be a bit old, that are not as much used anymore. Those types tend to move down into the freight fleets or into smaller airlines or down into Africa or into Asia. The smaller airlines and the African airlines, they will have less requirements on you as a direct entry. So if you look at the type like the MD-80, for example, or smaller turboprop aircraft, the Saab, maybe the Jetstream, they might be a possibility for you to take that type rating, which costs pretty much the same as the Boeing 737 type rating, should be said, and still get an airline job. So even though it sounds counterintuitive that you would buy a less sought after type and that would be easier to get a job with, that's pretty much the case. The more the newer types, the more attractive types, they will be flown by airlines that have much higher requirements. So think of that before you go in to buy a type rating. Now, I hope this has been helpful. Please keep sending in questions, and I'll try to answer them as quickly as I can. It's great to see that you're all starting to send in questions and to interact, because that's really what I'm after. Also, it would be great if you would link to this if you like it, tell your friends in the industry or whatever about this if you think it's helpful. So I'm trying to spread this channel a little bit, so all help is appreciated. Thank you very much, and see you next time.